Here's something I see all the time. A family moves to Lynchburg and they find a house they love, and 6 months later, they're frustrated. Not with the house, but because they didn't realize that their neighborhood feeds into a completely different school system than what they thought. And the system was not what they assumed. And look, I get it. When you're relocating, you've got 1,000 things on your plate, and the school system probably just feels like another thing on the checklist. But in Lynchburg, where you live doesn't just affect your commute. It actually determines which of the 5 different public school systems that your kid can attend. Plus, there's over 20 private school options, and it has one of the most active homeschooling communities in Virginia. So today, I'm going to walk you through all of it, how each path actually works, what the real trade-offs are, and how families are typically thinking through these decisions. That way, you don't accidentally lock yourself into the wrong option before you've even started house hunting. Hey, I'm Adam Stinespring. I'm a realtor here in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I work with relocating families pretty much every week. And this is a conversation that I have over and over. So I figured it was time that we just make a video about it so it's all in one place. Quick note, I will be putting the links to every school system website, enrollment info, and official resources in the description. So if you want to know more like actual statistics and numbers, obviously you can go check those out there. All right, let's get into it. The first thing to understand is that you're not really just choosing a school. You're actually choosing a system. And that system affects way more than just where your kid sits in the classroom. It affects your morning commute, your after school logistics, or whether your kid can walk to a friend's house or they need a 20-minute Uber to get there. It even affects sports programs and the different pathways that are available as they get older. Really, there are 3 main paths. There's public school, private school, or homeschool and hybrid models. Most families have a gut sense of which direction they're leaning even before they start house hunting, but a lot of people are surprised by what's actually available once they've seen these options. So let's start with public schools because honestly, that's where most families begin. There are 5 public school systems that families in the Lynchburg area are typically considering. Lynchburg City Schools, Campbell County, Bedford County, Amherst County, and Appomattox County. And here's the thing, these systems don't compete with each other. They are totally separate geographical areas with totally different structures and styles. So really you're choosing where you want to live, but also what kind of system will fit your family and your child. So let's break down each one. The Lynchburg City Schools serves families living inside of the city limits. The system probably has about 8,000 students as far as the public system goes, across multiple elementary schools, a few middle schools, and 2 high schools, EC Glass and Heritage. Families who choose the city often value shorter commute, walkable neighborhoods, and access to programs you'd expect in an urban school system. Things like robust art programs, AP and dual enrollment classes, and international baccalaureate options like at EC Glass. The city has also invested heavily into its facility upgrades over the past several years. So even though the buildings have some historic charm on the outside, the insides are actually renovated quite nicely. The practical trade-off is with only 2 high schools, you do have less variety when it comes to that level. Your neighborhood will determine which one your child attends, and the 2 schools have completely different cultures and strengths. Some families do love that simplicity, but others do wish they had a few more options. Also worth noting is city schools tend to have more socioeconomic diversity than some of the surrounding county schools. For a lot of people, this is actually what draws them to it, but for others, it's something you just want to understand before you commit to it. Now, Campbell County. Campbell County wraps around Lynchburg on the east and southern side. It's the largest geographic county, and it serves around 8,500 students-ish. The county is divided into attendance zones, and each feeds its own elementary, middle, and high school. So where you buy a home matters because 2 houses that are a mile apart might actually feed completely separate school systems. Now, families who choose Campbell usually want that suburban or rural feel while staying close enough to commute to Lynchburg. You do get more land and more space, and it's also a different pace. Campbell is also known for its career and technical education center. So high schoolers can actually earn certifications in everything from welding to healthcare even before they graduate. The trade-off is distance. So Campbell is big, and some students will have very long bus rides. So if your kid is doing after-school activities, then you're probably going to expect quite a bit of driver's seat time. Now, Bedford County. Bedford County is the largest system, around 10,000 students, and it's really multiple systems in one. The county stretches from Forest, which feels like a Lynchburg suburb, all the way down to even Smith Mountain Lake. And because of that size, you get the most variety within a single public system. There's multiple high schools, strong dual enrollment with the community college, and different community vibes depending on where you end up landing. Forest has actually become, I would say, one of the most popular areas for relocating families because it's minutes from Lynchburg with access to the Jefferson Forest High School and also the county programs. Now, the trade-off is that Bedford County is not just one thing. The experience varies pretty significantly by location, and commute times are going to swing wildly depending on where you decide to buy. Now, Amherst County. Amherst County sits just north of Lynchburg. It's smaller and more centralized than Bedford or Campbell County. The entire county actually feeds into one high school, which is Amherst County High, along with a middle school and several elementary schools. The total enrollment probably sits at around 4,500 students. Families who choose Amherst usually want the small system feel. Everyone knows everyone. Maybe your kid's teacher taught an older sibling. There's a real sense of community that's a little harder to manufacture in the larger systems. Amherst does offer a little more proximity to Lynchburg without being in the city, but it's kind of like Campbell County where the commutes can still wildly vary depending on where you're at. You will get more of a rural lifestyle, but you still have to be considerate with the commute. The trade-off here is fewer options. So with one high school, what you see is going to be what you get. If your child wants a specific program that Amherst doesn't offer, then there's not any alternative campus to try. That simplicity is a feature for some families, and it can also be a limitation for others. And lastly, Appomattox County. It is the smallest system that families typically consider in this area. It's probably about 2,200 students total. It's a true small town system. One primary school, one elementary school, one middle school, one high school. Actually reminds me very much of where I grew up in Hampshire County, West Virginia. Everyone in the county goes to the same pipeline together. Families who choose Appomattox almost always do this intentionally. They really want that close-knit, everybody knows your name environment. Class sizes are smaller. The community is generally going to be a lot tighter. The trade-off is exactly what you would expect. There's going to be fewer bells and whistles and a longer drive if you're commuting all the way into Lynchburg for work. But for families who really value that small town feel, then Appomattox delivers in a way that large systems just won't even touch. Now, key takeaways with public schools. Here's the mental model that I give families when they're comparing the public school systems. Really, you're choosing between option density, as in lots of options, or simplicity. Larger systems like Bedford or Lynchburg are going to offer more pathways, more variety, but also more complexity. Smaller systems like Appomattox or Amherst are going to give you that simplicity and the community, but you're going to have fewer alternatives if something isn't really working. Neither is inherently better. It really depends on your family. Now let's talk private schools because Lynchburg is probably going to surprise you here. We have over 20 private school options, which is incredibly unusual for a city and area of this size and stature. And they are not all the same type of private school. Most fall into a few categories. You've got everything from larger established ones like Liberty Christian Academy and Timberlake Christian, even down to some smaller church-affiliated programs. These schools integrate a Christian worldview into the curriculum and most often require a statement of faith or a family interview. The next is a classical Christian school. So these are classical education models. Think grammar, logic, rhetoric stages, Latin, the great books curriculum. Veritas Academy is probably the most well-known here locally, but families choose this path for educational philosophy alignment as much as the faith integration. Montessori schools and alternative models, there are a few options in this department, but they're mostly at the elementary school level, and these are focused on the self-directed learning and mixed-aged classrooms. Hybrid schools. This is actually a growing category. Hybrid programs combine the classroom days, usually 2 or 3 a week, with the homeschool days. It's kind of the middle ground for families who do want some structure, but really desire flexibility as well. Here's the honest reality. The private schools, families choose them for worldview alignment, smaller class sizes, or for a specific educational philosophy. It's not because there's no public options or because public options are bad. They just want something more focused. But they do come with a tuition, and the tuitions range pretty widely. There's some that are under $5,000 and others that are north of $15,000. Many offer financial aid or multi-child discount, so the sticker price is not always the final number. The practical trade-off here is the families who do this must weigh the cost and the commute, because private schools do generally draw from a wider area, so your child's classmate might live 30 to 45 minutes away, and that affects carpools and birthday parties and even after school hangouts. Most families can absorb either the tuition or the commute trade-off, but both together can create friction if you don't plan ahead for it. Now, let's talk homeschooling, because this is another one that actually surprises a lot of relocating families. Lynchburg has one of the most developed homeschool ecosystems in Virginia. That's actually why a lot of families move to Lynchburg. They plan on homeschooling, not because they're running away from the public school or private school sectors, but because they're running for the infrastructure of the homeschooling. And I don't mean just, a handful of families are, doing schoolwork around the kitchen table. I'm talking co-ops with hundreds of families, hybrid academies with full facilities and sport leagues and fine art programs, science labs, the whole works. Virginia law allows homeschooling through several different legal pathways, and the Lynchburg area has already built the infrastructure to support any approach that you would really want to take. Here's what that actually looks like for families who live here. The first one is the co-op option. So groups of homeschool families basically pool into a resource. Parents teach the subject they're strong in. Maybe one teaches, biology, another dad teaches, history, and kids get group instruction plus social time. Some co-ops are more casual and others are highly structured, even with, grades and transcripts. Next is the hybrid academies, which we've kind of already talked about. These are formal programs where students attend classes 2 to 3 days a week, and then they are homeschooled for the rest. University model schools are probably the most common version here. You get the professional teachers, a real classroom environment, but also you get the flexibility of homeschooling. And then for high schoolers, there's actually dual enrollment with this homeschooling side. A lot of homeschoolers can take classes from Central Virginia Community College, or CVCC, and earn college credits. A lot of homeschool families use this path pretty heavily. It's not unusual for homeschooling kids to come out with 30 to 40 college credits already completed even before they've technically passed high school level. Now, one thing to know, Virginia does not allow homeschool students to participate in public sports. So if athletics do matter a ton to your family, then you're going to obviously be looking at homeschool leagues and private school teams or community programs like league sports. The trade-off with homeschooling is going to be the responsibility. You do gain enormous flexibility, but parents often carry more of the planning, the coordination, and the accountability side. And that is energizing for some families, and it can be exhausting for others. So just know which one you are before you commit and be very honest with yourself. So with all these options, what do families actually do to help narrow this down? In my experience, it usually comes down to 3 questions. 1, how much daily structure does your child actually need? Because some kids, they do thrive with a full day of classroom instruction. Others do better with flexibility and self-direction. But be honest about your kid, who they are, not just who you wish they would be. The second question is, how far are you willing to commute every day? This does sound simple, but that one does catch people off guard. You can go check out the geographic map breakdown that I have that gives you kind of how Lynchburg works and its commutes. But that private school that's 35, 40 minutes away sounds fine until you're doing it twice a day, 5 days a week for years. The truth is, commute tolerance varies by family. Just know what your tolerance is. And 3, do you want more options or do you want more simplicity as your kid gets older? Elementary schools are going to be relatively similar across the board, but by high school, the different paths, programs, culture, it gets real. So think ahead to what your kids will want when they're 16, not just what will work when they're 6. Once families get clear on these 3 things, the pathway usually becomes a little more obvious. Now, a caveat here is the truth is you're never just locked into one location. Generally, after 5 to 7 years, you'll probably have enough equity in your home to at least consider making a move if something isn't working. But a 5 to 7 year commitment still takes time and consideration, and that's why I wanted to make this video. Another piece to this puzzle is there are ways to petition, if you're in a different county or school system, to petition to be in another school system. Maybe your child has special needs and they need a specific program from a specific school, but you live in a different district. There are ways to coordinate this, but it does get really complicated. And of course, if it's a public school, then you're going to have to worry about maybe the bus doesn't run in your area to take your child there. So just think through those logistics before you go down that rabbit hole. If you are moving to Lynchburg and you're trying to line up housing with specific school paths, whether it's public or private or homeschool, and that's exactly the kinds of conversations that I help families, navigate through and give them the necessary resources to think through. So if you reach out, we can kind of make sense of all of this as you're looking for the right place here in the Lynchburg area one day. And again, I'll put all the links to the school system websites and the enrollment resources in the description below. And of course, I'll link my website as well. So if you want to reach out, feel free to do so. I pretty much always pick up my phone unless it's unreasonable hours. And if you do reach out, well then, I guess I'll see you at the closing table.